Hey neighbors, a handyman here with Initiative Coffee Company along with Jake Delmaro. And today we're talking about DDEX 3-5, Bane of the Tradeways. Writer Robert Alanis, editors Claire Hoffman, Chris Tulach, Travis Woodall. This is a 4-hour mod for Tier 1 characters tuned for 5 third-level characters. Players are further exposed to the corruption of the Red Plume Guard. It features a potentially exciting chase scene. Part 1. The decision. The module starts with the party stumbling on open conflict between the Red Plume Guard and bandits. The party needs to decide whether and how to intervene. They can side with the guards or the bandits or no one. If they choose no one, they'll have to fight the winning side. Starting off, Jake, we open up with a fight here.
My name's just Jacob Delmaro. This is
Today.
the first time. I feel like I'm being attacked. Honestly, this is unacceptable. Either way, first sequence. I do like choosing sides here.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of, not gonna lie, determines 7 to 10 page. No, probably 6, maybe in the last pages. It's like there's a lot of what is the contingencies here, where if you decide on one side, it's like, but you have to prep the whole thing. But like if you decide on one side, then you can cut out pages. Cool, love it. Less prep work, awesome.
Well, it's the same amount of prep work because you have to be prepared for it either way. But
less thinking, awesome.
Less thinking. Yeah.
There you go. I'm just gonna be out there. We're in part 1. This mod to me just is a heavy-handed combat mod. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. Asterisks. There's something wrong with it for me. I'm trying to actively make it so combat is not the end-all be-all solution. And I hate saying this as I ran this mod, and then Brian read it and was like, yikes, there's no wiggle room.
Yeah.
There's no wiggle room for just like really talking about it.
Sure.
And it stinks, but I like the idea. I don't think there's a situation if the characters ran 3-2, they're not gonna like the Red Plume. Either they're wanted by the Red Plume,
or they are aware of how evil the Red Plume Guard is.
Yeah, there's the corruption involved.
Yeah.
So I do not foresee a situation where anyone unless this is the
first mod you run in season 3.
But even still, I think I would be the person that's gonna fight for the little people.
Sure.
Like you can lean in, and this is, I think, an interesting point to point out. If you have know in the beginning of the mod what kind of race of characters you're playing. If it's not human, make the people who are quote unquote thugs. It's a fat stat block. Make at least 1 or 2 of those like people, or like
similar in race,
or see a dead one that's next to him. And, like, you can tell that these human Red Plumes are killing these dwarves, or killing these halflings, or killing these tieflings, whatever it is.
You can also speak up, talk up the idea that like their humanity is why they're doing it, right? Like people shout when they fight other people, right? Like you can put any number of terrible things in these Red Plumes' mouths because they're terrible NPCs, right? Like they're bad.
They're
dudes.
Doing something shady, and
for sure.
They're transporting people under the means of figs.
Right.
That's awful.
They're slavers. Like there's no bones about it here. Like
so I think that if you read it through, it's so easy to force your hand as to who they're going to side with. You only need one person. Let's be real here. In this kind of level of combat, or a level of new people, even if they're not like don't know each other, if you have one person that's committed to the cause, they'll be like, all right, that sounds good.
All right, fine, yeah.
Yeah, and like that's all it takes. So you just need to, if you've got one person that's like, I'm so and so from this race, blah blah blah, lean into them. Just make it easy on your life. Don't cause wishy-washiness. Just lean into it. Make them want to do it. It's gonna happen. It's not gonna be hard. I like the story behind this mod because it's like, we understand we're not supposed to be killing Red Plumes. Red Plumes, though, are doing something shady. So we're just like
kind of like ourselves. The worst thing, right? Like it's not just something shady, but they're doing the worst shady thing.
They are doing the worst thing
Like,
shady. Not only that, they're selling them to Duragar, but
Yeah.
like we'll get to that. It just, I feel it's really easy to just lean in. Your players are not gonna go the other way. They're not gonna side with the red plume. I've never, after the
I've never seen it happen. Yeah.
Never seen it happen. I didn't realize that Carl was actually NPC named Dumb Carl. That was a new one for me. But like, you know what? Make your character, make the dwarf that they meet is just someone that's like just there. Make him real, make him alive, make him here the person that's gonna take care of everything they don't need to worry about. It brings life to the character.
Yeah.
I think other than that, you're not gonna have I don't think you're going to see much inactivity here because the players are gonna want to do something.
Yeah.
So I don't think you should worry about they don't do anything part. That throw it away.
Yeah.
They're not gonna just force the hand.
Sure.
Other than that, it's a tough combat.
It's pretty stiff, yeah.
I would say
it's the first of 3 combats, and it's
the first of 3 combats
without a break, without
a break, and I gave a short rest because of how badly just things went. You're not supposed to, but like, it was rough.
Yeah.
If at this current level of play, it really points to the fact, and we spoke about this in 3-1, where using the help action and all that using your character's full kit is more important, or forcing people to do saves versus just swinging is something important here. 16, 17 AC, people have +5 max.
This module is going to teach you why combat at tier 1 sucks, right?
Yes.
Like, this module is going to teach you why levels 1 through 4 people are bad at combat. It's because they will not hit most of the time.
Yeah.
So even like small encounters with 3 to 4 people, if they're heavily armored, are going to be an hour.
That's a
40
long
minutes.
combat.
Like, it's a long combat either way. Yeah.
And you're not gonna. And Brian and I had this conversation about it too. It is not fun to be in there and be involved for that long. Like, you want to make combat, and this is like a philosophy I've kind of developed over the last few years. I'll probably say multiple times over the course of these videos, is as soon as the capacity to kill is gone, and I'm not talking about like, oh well, the guard's still alive. As soon as the main threat is gone, I have zero desire to run the combat as a DM anymore, because it's just swinging, and that's so boring. Like,
yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's probably like a guideline you could run into where like combat should probably not last more than 4 or 5 rounds, unless like your monsters or whatever are still doing cool things, right? Like, if you're presenting a new cool ability still, there's a reason for that combat to continue, right? Because your players will be like, oh, whoa, that's cool, but oh no.
It's not in tier 1 though.
It almost never happens in tier 1. But
it'll be an environmental effect that would change. But like,
right,
when it's
like,
coming
if
down
there's
to,
not
hey,
a new
does 17
thing,
hit?
Yeah, if there's not a new thing happening in the combat, you've got 2 or 3 rounds max before your players have checked out. Like, and that's just the way it is.
It's tough because that's just sometimes the nature of these combats. And being that we're in the second mod, mind you, we're only in the second mod outside the 5. Like, you have another 4 or 5 mods in the current season of play, and how XP is awarded. Actually, there is no XP. It's just you level up or you don't.
Yep.
And people can max out at 4 real quick.
Yep.
And be stuck at 4. They'll know the ins and outs of their character, and also be bored by the ins and outs of their character, because there's nothing else to do. There's nothing else to gain. There's nothing else to look forward to.
Especially if you've got players who aren't like able to change out their spells every day, or like ways to like find new interesting ways to play their characters. Yeah. And especially at this tier, for sure.
And unfortunately, it's going to happen in our group, but it's like these mods were based in the sense that you're getting XP, and it stinks. I'm not a fan because I'm 3 years in, and I'm not by any means compared to Brian. Like, he's got 20 plus years of D&D. I think levels 1, 2 are boring.
Mhm.
Just as a player, like unless it's crucial for the understanding of my character or development of a story.
Yeah.
I hate 1 and 2 because a bad critical, you're dead.
I don't think 1 and 2 lends itself to an organized play setting, to a module based setting. I think levels 1 and 2 are much more useful in like a homebrew setting where
It makes a difference.
where you get to find out what you're bad at, frankly, where you get to find out what the story is about,
Yep.
right? Like the issue with these mods, and like it's each season has a different level of whether or not they fall into this problem, right?
Yep.
But there's not an overarching story necessarily that you introduce in 2 or 3-5 that fulfills itself in 3-10, right?
Yep.
Like there's no, like they're all like independent
It alludes,
modules,
but not
right?
enough.
But
like,
not in a satisfying way that
like
makes this low level play, like slogging through this low level play, pay off, right?
Well, I agree. And I think we spoke about this in 3-2's mod video, is why not throw something in there that's like, you did it. You slogged through it.
Yeah.
Because what this alludes to in the larger scheme of the demon, the rise of demons or whatever it's called, is that there is shady stuff happening on the surface that's bleeding into the underground or the Underdark. But okay, we don't have any named people in the background.
There's no context for it.
No named, and we have few named NPCs, one of which you kill because he betrays you if for some reason you side with the Red Plumes. And you have Dumb Carl. Dumb Carl's not going to come back up. Come on. I mean, he actually might in our game.
He might in our game, but that's because we'll make him come up, right?
Exactly.
Like, I don't know. Like, Dumb Carl seems to be a throwaway NPC to me because they've named him Dumb Carl. Like, frankly, like,
moniker.
Sure, but like, I don't know. I just don't. There's nothing invested in the character, and like we've talked about it before, but that's frankly a fundamental issue with how seasons are written, right? Like if they had a primer at the beginning of the season that they handed out to all the authors that said like, this is the story, these are the main characters, incorporate these as you want to, it'd be one thing, but they just like hire authors
that were not part of the factions.
Sure.
And that's my big asterisk is as long as they were not part of the factions, just 3 people that were like this person, and they could be varying degrees. Like this is your primary contact. Here's your secondary. Here's your tertiary.
Here's
and like the tertiary
NPCs,
could be like the less serious person, but like at least they're involved enough where it's like, well, we're running into them now. I can trust this person. Now I know this is happening. That to me would bake real well in the oven.
Yeah, if there was a seasonal dramatis personae that like the authors could look to and be like, oh, I'm going to incorporate these NPCs, it would lead to a consistency between these modules that made these like slogs seem to pay off in some way later, or gave the opportunity for them to pay off. And frankly, like the fact that they just kind of hire authors to write mods based off a general theme of a season, like I get that like that's the way that they write their modules, and I get that there's some organizational issues that make that necessary, but it also makes them not as good as they could be.
I do believe and once again we had to get back to the mod, and we always do this, but the season 3 mods, 2 mods, 1 mods, I feel have a lot more. I'm saying this really, really poorly after our pre-recording statement. This was one of those mods that you're not sure why it's 4 hours because it's 3 combats. But like minus one of these mods, this mod in particular, this is something that's like they were a lot more like keeping authors in a select pool. As we get further and further away from the origins of AL, it becomes guild adepts, which is fine because it's different thought processes. It just it feels like no one sat down in a Zoom call or whatever, a Discord, and went, "Hey, I'm going to talk about this." I think there needs to be a little bit more coherency here
Because
I think
otherwise
that
it just seems like CCCs, right? Otherwise they
yes,
just feel like concreted content written by whoever decided to write that mod.
and even this mod, as you stated, it's kind of like there's no way to pull back. It brings an interesting concept that there's slavery going on
Mm-hmm.
and this also actually brings back to the last mod,
Mm-hmm.
3.2, a tier 1 mod, with the slavery. It brings that idea up, but like you could, with the current mod setups that CCCs have, which are like caravan protection or whatever those four
Right, and those are gonna
blanket things are.
hopefully those will
This is what
change
that
every
is.
quarter or whatever. But like,
But
yeah.
this is what that is. It's a caravan, either protection or raid.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
Like you can change the red plume out for the black fist. You can change the this out to the Molmasterite guard.
Yeah.
You can change it out for whomever. It doesn't need a, and I'm not saying you should or you can. It's just like I don't know why this mod was.
Nothing about this module screams season 3 to me.
Yeah, and like I mean, if you look at season 1s and 2s from all the reviews that I've done, like independently or me and you, there's actually never been a mod actually that was just 3 combats. This is a combat only mod, and if you
I mean, there's a bit of exploration in part 2 that we'll get to, but if you add me in the comments, avoided, like
from 1-4, that's on a combat only mod. I'm gonna fight you and come to your house and fight you, because that's not a combat only mod. It's an exploration mod. That's the only other one that could potentially say it is a combat only mod, and I'll fight everybody in the comments for this.
1-4.
Dues for the Dead.
Oh, Dues for the Dead. Yeah. There's a lot to that mod.
There's a lot to that mod. There's a lot of combat. There's a lot of combat,
but there's a lot of traps and like those types of things. Anyway, part 2, the chase. If the party sided with the Red Plume Guards, they're brought in to escort the caravan. If they didn't side with the Red Plume Guards, a bandit named Dumb Carl puts them on the trail to chase down the Red Plume caravan. Either way, there's an interesting chase sequence filled with exploration checks. So here's the things I like about this, right? Like, they're trying to fit in exploration in the module. They try. I think like it's easy to avoid. I think like there are a lot of ways that like this exploration checks don't end up doing anything. There's a chart with like consequences that could happen, which is neat, but largely could be avoided very quickly. I don't know. There's an expectation that this chase sequence is going to take a substantial amount of time. In our experience, it took 2 rounds. Like
one round. It took not even a round.
Right. Like, I mean, there's lots of ways to figure it out.
Resourcefulness is the thing that I award most favorably. If you use something, if you use a spell that's not attack based, hey, people watching this, if you use a spell that's not attack based at my table, you're gonna get a lot more results than what the spell might even ask for, because that to me is thinking that's not just I'm gonna drop a fireball. I know we're in tier 1, but that lends itself to be more interesting to me because it helps me not only as a DM but as a player. Because
entanglement is far more interesting than guiding bolt. Like you know what I mean? Like there's more to it.
Cloud, suggestion, any of those spells, you could figure it out if you made a good enough argument as to why this happens. And I'm not saying that my table argues, but if you give me an explanation as to what you're doing and what your intended goal is, I'm on your side. I'm here to tell the story. I'm here to I want you to come back and go, that was awesome. I had a situation where somebody cast suggestion to make. I'm not going to talk about the part where you said about the chase, or I guess like the exploration part, because that's kind of self-explanatory to me. You just got to go do it. But I had a player cast suggestion, and the person failed on the cart and caused like a 3-car pile or 2-car pile up on a road that only is 1 cart length, and
on the first turn of the first round of an encounter,
the first. And what happened was the other turn they pulled around because they caused a pile up when they stopped. Guy comes around, the guy drops the suggestion and fog clouds and causes like the crazy cool. Oh, this is awesome! This is Gladiator two mods in a row. What they do in Gladiator with Russell Crowe, coolest movie ever, where they like knock the chariot on the side, and like, but what happened was that the horses plowed, but like the other fig container that was in the first cart goes flying. That becomes a projectile because of a fog cloud.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's something that, like, if I had to say is a highlight for me, but also for my players to go, remember that time when, we caused a projectile, like, the
And your players want to have those conversations 8 months from now. Like, that's why they're playing, is to have the ability to go to a convention and say, like, oh, this one time in 3-5, we caused a three cart pile up and jettisoned a wagon. Like, those kind of conversations are the things that your players are going to think about and remember long term. And that's why from the get-go with this video series, I've always tried to express that you should focus on your players' enjoyment over your author's intent, right? Like, if the author wants to have an hour-long exploration check session and your players aren't into it, who cares what the author wanted to do? Like, if they come up with creative ways to avoid it, more power to them, man. Like, I don't know.
But then you come into, once again, a long combat.
Yeah, it's also a long combat.
This is a long combat, and it's not even intentionally long. It's just people are beefy.
17 armor class killer. Like,
I guess just use your best judgment, because if you do something really cool like that and say, like, oh yeah, I just jettison cargo essentially over and cause players to get hit by stuff, awesome, cool, dope. I don't like chase sequences because I think that they're not.
I think they are ever. I think the intent is always good. I don't think they are ever thought through enough for the typical Adventures League player, or
DM.
Right, because I think every time that there is a cool chase sequence, one of your players is going to find a way to cut the chase sequence short.
Yeah, they cast hold person and the person's stuck, and it's like, well, that was a fun chase sequence.
It happened in 2-3 with a fly spell and a earth grasp. Like, it happens every time these chase sequences come up.
I almost, as soon as I see chase sequences, I'm like, well, I'm just expect for this to not run for long, and then I always get my hopes up that it's gonna run longer, even though I don't like running chase sequences because it's so goofy. Because it's like, and then there's another left turn. It's like, why is this? Why do we have an offbound ramp on these roads? Like,
I would run this section. I would use the chase sequence information to guide your narrative and run this section as a skill challenge instead.
I actually, you know what? If I would have run this again, I'd probably run it as a skill challenge. I would probably say, what would you like to do?
Right.
And almost do it like the Wild West Will Smith kind of chase sequence. That's 2 movie references. Let's keep going.
Wiki wow.
Other than that, I think it's interesting altogether. It just takes one spell to F this thing up. And I say that without the swear word, but like it really does. And this section could take 2 hours, 1 hour. It could take 6 minutes, not even.
And I think that's why, like, the notion of replacing this with a skill challenge is nice, because that spell, maybe it's an automatic success, right? But it doesn't make 3 hours that you've prepped turn into 4 minutes, right? Like, there's still everybody else's turn in the skill challenge that they have to go through. Like, you have 1 success built in because your character used a creative spell. Maybe you give them 2 successes for being so creative or whatever, but you still have to, like, finish the challenge, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, like, it's easy to think about skill challenges as being this 10-minute thing, but I mean, we had a homebrew session the other day where a skill challenge took over an hour. Like, we had a 3-round skill challenge and it lasted an hour because our players were invested. So
sorry. Either way, I think it's important to note that, once again, we say this, we are not trying to win as DMs. It's more so just to create consistency, and sometimes we also go off the rails, and by we I mean me, about what's going on in these mods and how we feel about them. But if you can create consistency in your mods, where if you find certain spots that you are more successful doing other things than what is written, you're not circumventing the mod. Right. It's just when a player decides to do something that totally screws up your entire combat or entire, like, oh, this is a grandiose sequence. It feels awful, and you get it's like getting caught with your pants down.
Yeah.
It's just be prepared that will happen, and maybe instead of that, you getting getting caught with your pants down, you just like roll with it, and instead you just do a skill challenge.
Yeah.
Because honestly, having handouts is not a thing anymore because of COVID. Playing in person isn't a thing.
Sure.
At least,
and hopefully it will be eventually.
Hopefully it will be, but like we're not.
But for the time being,
that.
it's not an option. So
and it's tough. So like, why not remove like the ability to have? And this is where I loved the most, where I could have my models out, and it was cool. And if somebody messed it up, it would be like, at least it looks cool.
Right.
Like that's not there anymore.
Right.
So let's just replace it with a skill challenge. Do it. If you're on Patreon or whatever it is, or if you take the time to listen to any of our games, just do it, or like tune in on our every other Thursdays. Just do skill challenges instead. Like it, and like you don't need to come up with stuff. Just be like, hey, what would you do to stop this caravan?
I mean, that's the benefit of the skill challenge, is it's not your job to come up with stuff. It's your players, right? It becomes your players' responsibility to come up with the justifications, and then you make an adjustment to the DC or give advantage or disadvantage as a reaction to that, based off your gut feeling, right? Like, I think like, and they focus so much on exploration, which has not traditionally been, it's kind of traditionally been like the redheaded stepchild of, the 3 pillars of play, and it's largely forgotten about.
Yep.
Potentially for good reason, like it goes quicker, right? Like it's not a good way to fill time. It fills pages without filling time sometimes. I don't know. Like there's a lot of reasons to focus on other pillars of play. But because of that, it's kind of left out quite often. So anyway, part 3, the roadside shrine. Caravan either makes it to its destination or is stopped. Either way, the party is faced with a stiff encounter with the Red Plume Guards or bandits, which we've already talked about. During the encounter, it becomes obvious that the caravan is holding slaves. After confronting the guards, the party heads to the drop point where the Red Plume Guard planned to meet Dwergar slavers and have an additional encounter. This is 3 encounters back to back to back. Maybe you've gotten a short rest, but the mod says you don't. 3 encounters is tough. This is, and it's frustrating. Not only because it's tier 1 and like your players have low hit points and have low attack rolls, but also because it's tier 1 and your players have less resources, right? Like 3 encounters for a spellcaster, they're out of spells 2 encounters ago.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, they just don't have the resources to go this deep. So I think replacing the second encounter with something else is a good way to kind of circumvent that. Yeah. The final encounter with some Dwergar and some Death Dogs is fine.
Not tough. I mean, it is tough. It's not easy. Yeah. It is if the Death Dogs get off the things they need to get off, your characters are getting smoked.
Yeah.
And the Dwergar are doing 10 plus damage. Your characters have max 35, 40, maybe?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I got really nothing else to say about this mod. There's a lot of combat.
It's a lot of combat. It's a lot of stiff combat.
This is one of those combats you can't remove.
Yeah.
This is important to the story.
It's the first time that like the notion of the Underdark is brought up, aside from like
3-1, but like
3-1 really with Ariz. I think that's important. I'm disappointed that there's not more of that connection here. Like there's no like journal found on these Dwergar. There's no like indication as to like what is happening that brings this and correlates it to the rest of the season, or the Rage of Demons book, which this whole season is supposed to be in support of. I wish it was more of that. I wish the combats flowed easier, or there were less of them. I don't know.
It's not a bad mod. I just would not run this if I had a choice of mods. We have talked about at this point over 25 mods, or whatever the number is, or we've at least discussed, maybe not on video, but we've had deep discussions about season 1, 2, 3,
and
then CCCs, and even seasons 7, 8, 9.
Yeah.
Like, this is not the mod I'm gonna pull out as my like. This is the one.
No.
Like this is not top 10 for me. This is like.
And frankly,
top
like
50.
And frankly, in season 3, there's no need to run it because you don't need to run all the tier 1 mods to get to tier 2 anymore. Like when you needed experience points to get to tier 2, it made more sense, but that is gone by the wayside, and so I don't know that this mod is necessary. It's fine, you know.
Like there's a host of other mods that I'd rather run the entirety season 1 and season 2 than play this one.
Yeah.
And that sounds really awful, but like there's other ones that are more convincing of a storyline than this one, and this one's just like I'm gonna huck dice night.
Yeah, it just doesn't seem,
which could be cool.
Yeah.
But it's not how my players want to play.
I mean, like we said, like you could replace the Red Plume with any other like faction, and this mod wouldn't change at all.
Yeah.
Right. There's nothing about season 3 that really really shines here. I don't know. Anyway, there it is. DDEX 3-5, Bane of the Tradeways. Thanks for listening to some advice to streamline and run out your tables. Be a good neighbor, give us a thumbs up, and subscribe. Toll the Dead for notifications. Check out our Patreon where you can see the playthroughs for these mods that we do to prep for these videos. Those are available to patrons at the $5 tier. Find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And from now, until the next time, roll together.